Picture a vast Roman army, a seemingly endless line of disciplined soldiers clad in gleaming armor, marching through a hostile, unyielding desert. The desert air is shimmering with heat, and the merciless sun beats down on them without mercy. Dust clings to their faces, their armor feels more like a furnace than protection, and each step forward is a test of endurance and resolve. Ahead lies Arabia, a land shrouded in myth and mystery, a place of untold riches and desolate sands, stretching farther than the eye can see. This is no ordinary desert. This is Arabia, known in Roman tales as a place of both fortune and danger, a region where treasures unimaginable beckon from across the endless dunes. The Romans, who have conquered lands from Britain to the lush Nile Delta, now stand on the brink of one of their most formidable challenges. Imagine you're standing in Rome around 25 BCE. Augustus Caesar reigns over an empire so vast that it stretches from the cool shores of the Atlantic to the lush lands along the Euphrates. Trade routes carry goods, wealth, and influence across Roman lands, filling the empire with prosperity. Yet for all its power, there is one region that has escaped Rome's reach: Arabia. The peninsula is not just another frontier, it holds a promise of treasures, resources, and strategic advantages. Arabia, to the Romans, is no mere desert, it is a land with the keys to unimaginable wealth. Chief among these treasures are frankincense and myrrh, two commodities so valuable that they were often worth their weight in gold. These fragrant resins were essential in the religious and social customs of the Roman world, burned in temples and homes alike. The scent of these spices was woven into the fabric of Roman life, and almost all of it came from southern Arabia. But Arabia was more than the source of luxury items. It was a gateway, a nexus of vital trade routes that connected the Roman Empire to India, Africa, and beyond. Arabian ports and caravan cities stood as the meeting points for goods from across the world. Spices from India, silks from China, exotic animals from Africa, all passed through Arabian trade routes, and controlling this region would mean a direct hand in these lucrative exchanges. The Romans referred to this fabled land as Arabia Felix, or Fortunate Arabia, in reference to its wealth. They knew that to control Arabia would be to control these trade routes and the wealth they promised. Yet, despite their legendary power, the Roman Empire failed to conquer Arabia. The reasons for this are as complex as they are fascinating, involving a unique blend of geography, climate, local culture, and military strategy. These factors combined to create an obstacle that even Rome's celebrated legions could not overcome. To appreciate why the Romans failed, we must first understand the nature of Arabia itself. The Arabian Peninsula is one of the most extreme environments on Earth. Deserts stretch for hundreds of miles, and temperatures regularly reach upwards of 120 degrees Fahrenheit, 49 degrees Celsius. The land is marked by vast, empty dunes, mountain ranges, and scattered oases. For the Roman soldiers, clad in heavy armor and unaccustomed to such conditions, this landscape was a nightmare. Imagine attempting to march an entire army through a place so hot that even the air seems to shimmer and waver in the distance. Roman soldiers, with their layered armor and thick shields, were essentially encased in metal ovens under the desert sun. The iconic testudo formation, where soldiers locked their shields overhead to create a shell, would have been nearly impossible to maintain in the desert's intense heat. But the heat was only the beginning. Water, essential for any army, was scarce. Roman legions were accustomed to marching along rivers or coastlines where water was readily available. In Arabia, water sources were few and far between, and even those that existed could not support the needs of a large army. The Romans were skilled at building roads and supply lines, but the shifting sands of the desert posed a logistical nightmare. Sandstorms could appear without warning, obliterating roads, erasing paths, and rendering landmarks useless. How do you plan for a supply line that could vanish in a matter of minutes? How do you conquer a land that defies your very methods of warfare? For the local Arabs, however, this harsh environment was home. Over generations, they had adapted to the land, developing an intricate knowledge of every hidden oasis, every reliable water source, and every safe passage. Their survival in the desert was not a matter of brute force but of skill, patience, and a deep understanding of the land's secrets. They had bred camels, resilient animals that could carry supplies over great distances and endure long stretches without water. These animals became the lifeblood of Arabian warfare and commerce. For the Romans, who relied on horses that needed frequent watering, this was a game changer. Roman horses struggled in the desert sands, and their cavalry, typically a strong asset, found itself at a disadvantage. One of Rome's most dramatic attempts to conquer Arabia was the ill-fated expedition led by Aelius Gallus in 26 BCE. Augustus, who dreamed of expanding the empire into the east, dispatched Gallus with an army of 10,000 men with orders to subdue Arabia Felix and claim its riches for Rome. Gallus set out with high hopes, bolstered by the promise of Nabatean guides who supposedly knew the terrain well. But what happened next would become a cautionary tale in the annals of Roman history. Laden with heavy equipment, traditional Roman supplies, and wearing armor suited to European battlefields, the Roman army began its march. Almost immediately, they encountered problems. The desert heat was relentless, and soldiers fell ill from diseases unfamiliar to them. Water supplies dwindled, morale plummeted, and exhaustion set in. Some historians even suggest that the Nabatean guides may have intentionally led the Romans along more difficult routes to protect their own trading interests. The army pressed on, enduring 6 months of hardship, but they never even reached their main objective. Disease, dehydration, and fatigue took a deadly toll, and Gallus finally ordered a retreat. The journey back was no less grueling, and by the time the remnants of his army stumbled back to Egypt, they had lost more men to the desert than they ever did to battle. The campaign had been an utter failure, a stark reminder of the limitations of Roman power. This failed expedition reveals a key aspect of the Roman military system. The Romans were masters of conventional warfare. Their legions were nearly unbeatable in open battle, their siege tactics were highly developed, and their engineering prowess allowed them to build roads, fortifications, and supply lines wherever they went. But the Arabian desert required a different kind of warfare, one rooted in mobility, flexibility, and a deep familiarity with the land. The Roman way of war, which relied on strict formations, disciplined ranks, and heavily armored soldiers, was a liability in the desert. The Arabian tribes, on the other hand, had perfected the art of guerrilla tactics. They could appear out of nowhere, strike quickly, and vanish back into the desert before the Romans could mount a defense. It was as if they were fighting ghosts. The Arabs chose when and where to fight, while the Romans were forced to react, often at a disadvantage. This kind of warfare was alien to the Roman military mindset. They were used to capturing cities, fortifying positions, and forcing submission through sheer strength. But in Arabia, the Romans faced an enemy that was mobile, elusive, and intimately connected to its environment. How do you conquer a people who have no fixed cities, no farmlands, and no permanent settlements? How do you subdue a society that can simply pack up and move deeper into the desert? The Arabian tribes also had another advantage: their trading networks. These tribes had developed a sophisticated system of alliances and trade routes that stretched across the peninsula. They were not isolated tribes but part of a larger network of commerce, culture, and diplomacy that linked them to the outside world. The Romans, despite their diplomatic skills, struggled to penetrate these networks. The local tribes had long-standing agreements with each other, and they saw little reason to ally themselves with a foreign power that did not understand their ways or respect their independence. Another critical factor was the use of camels, animals that were as vital to Arabian society as horses were to Rome. Camels were uniquely suited to the desert. They could travel for days without water, carry heavy loads, and withstand the searing heat. Arab warriors had developed camel warfare to an art, using these animals to cover vast distances quickly and to launch surprise attacks on their enemies. The Romans, who had trained their cavalry on horses, found themselves at a severe disadvantage. Their horses needed frequent watering, couldn't handle the intense heat, and struggled in the soft sand. Despite their failure to conquer Arabia, the Romans did manage to establish some control over the fringes of the region, particularly in the north where the Nabatean kingdom eventually became the Roman province of Arabia Petrea. However, this was achieved more through diplomacy and trade than through military might. The Nabateans, recognizing the benefits of Roman trade and protection, chose to ally themselves with the empire while retaining a degree of autonomy. But the vast interior of Arabia and its wealthier southern regions remained beyond Rome's grasp. Rather than conquer Arabia, the Romans were forced to accept a different kind of relationship, one built on trade, diplomacy, and mutual benefit. This failure to conquer Arabia teaches us valuable lessons about empire and the limits of power. Military strength, no matter how formidable, cannot always overcome the forces of nature and the resilience of those who are intimately connected to their land. The Romans learned that sometimes, cooperation was more profitable than conquest. By failing to subdue Arabia, they inadvertently fostered a trading relationship that allowed Arabian merchants to become wealthy middlemen, controlling the flow of exotic goods into the empire. This story also illustrates the importance of adaptation. The Roman military system, designed for the temperate climates of Europe and the Mediterranean, was ill-suited for the harsh deserts of Arabia. The Arabs, by contrast, had built their entire way of life around the desert, developing lighter equipment, mobile warfare, and trading systems that worked with, rather than against, their environment. Geography, in this case, was as much a defense as any fortress or wall. The Romans' inability to conquer Arabia had consequences that reverberated through history. The Arabian Peninsula retained its independence, allowing it to preserve its unique culture, traditions, and ways of life. This independence would prove crucial when, centuries later, Arabia became the birthplace of Islam, a new faith that would give rise to a vast empire of its own. Imagine how different history might have been if the Romans had succeeded in their conquest. Would Islam have emerged in the same way? Would the Arab conquests that followed have taken place? These questions remind us that the course of history is often shaped by the battles not won, by the lands not conquered, and by the cultures allowed to flourish. This failure also highlights the economic implications of Rome's decision to work with Arab merchants rather than subjugate them. By allowing Arabian trade networks to thrive, the Romans contributed to the rise of a wealthy merchant class in Arabia. These merchants became essential players in the flow of goods, ideas, and, eventually, religion across the ancient world. The story of Rome's attempts to conquer Arabia serves as a powerful reminder of the limits of empire. Even the greatest empires have boundaries, not just physical, but practical. The Romans were wise enough to recognize when the cost of conquest outweighed the benefits, choosing instead to adapt to the realities they faced. This story also holds relevance for our modern world, where powerful nations sometimes struggle to achieve their objectives in regions where the local population is deeply rooted and well adapted to their environment.